Greetings, my name is Brendan Kersey, and in this video I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate my second prototype for my rail grinding mechanic that I've been working on. So without further ado, let's get started. So, note things from the last video, in case you hadn't quite seen the previous video. The previous video I was able to successfully get this character to be able to ride along the rail from beginning to end, kind of the rail with just a few things. So two major changes that I wanted to get accomplished for this new prototype was that I wanted to be able to lock the camera behind the player as they were riding the rail, and kind of have it auto-rotate as they go and twist and turn along the rail. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that. So it's a little bit, you take a minute to kind of notice things, but now I'm moving my mouse and just start to see how it's changing. But now you can see the camera is kind of locked behind the player and kind of rotating as the player rotates along the rail. One thing I've kind of found out is that with really sharp turns, it kind of quickly change around like that. So there are some things like that to kind of work on in the future. But I might play with with allowing the player to move around freely versus having a fixed camera position. I think that kind of might really give me more interesting. The second thing I wanted to kind of showcase was the fact that the second point I wanted to make was that I wanted to be able to hit along any point on this rail and then continue going. As previously, I was only able to go from start to finish no matter where I was on the rail. For the deal, kind of like on the rail out here. And you can see I attached to the rail, and now I am continuously moving from that point on forward down the rail. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty good, pretty basic. Like I said, this is only second prototype so far, so I'm looking to further improve it with some visuals, kind of clean up footage animations and stuff. You can see as my character seems to be continuously falling around the rail. And you can get some pretty good reaction to things. But I'm going to go ahead and talk real quick about how I was able to shoot things. Pull up my Visual Studio. I'll go ahead and stop the simulation from playing. There's no real reason to have it on right there. So some of the improvements from last time that I made was specifically to my two methods being grind and grind, which I'll go ahead and quickly run through in total, talking about the changes and as far as the method overall as well. So some of the changes from last time is specifically these lines that are right here at 207 and 208. I disabled the player control rotation, or sorry, not player, the pawn control rotation. What that basically allowed me to do was instead of it, what it basically does is it kind of bypasses the methods I'm using for rotating my camera. So that's what allows it to be at that fixed position behind the player. That's because without moving the mouse, that's where its default position is. And what it's also doing is that it's holding that default position as the player moves about in the world. So that was the first thing. The second bit, and this is I'll move on to, is how I actually got my contact point, how I was able to have my player make contact with the rail and then grind from that contact point. So that's with these lines right here. So I'll go over them real quick. So the first method that was key to this was this method here, find input key closer to world location. What this actually does is it finds a specific float range, and I'll get on my notepad here real quick to kind of demonstrate some of this. Put it here at the center. So what it does is it actually does a float range between 0 and the maximum number of spline points for my spline itself. I'll give a quick demo right here, kind of zoom in on that. So you'll notice my rail here has like these little small line segments driven with white lines in between them. So I apologize if you hear the ambient noise. I am currently recording in my room. I have family over for dinner, so they're enjoying themselves. But yeah, as you can see, these white line segments right here, these are called spline points. And what my range is actually doing is it's finding the maximum number of these spline points, these dots all along the rail, from the start over here where this white sphere is, all the way over to my end point right here. For this spline specifically, I have 32 for that. So I'm going to go ahead and just type that in between here. So what's essentially doing is it's finding a decimal value between 0 and 32. So say, for instance, I'm just going to kind of like make an estimation here based on this rail's total length. But, well, say from here. So I jump onto here, and let's say this is about maybe 1/8 of the total distance. So what that would indeed spit out to me is it would spit out 4.0 would be the value that it would give back to me. And so the way that this fits in into my the rest of my calculations is like this. So what I'll do is I'll get that float value here in this line, and then I'll get the total, the max range for this float by taking the maximum number of spline points and subtracting from 1. So sorry, I meant earlier that's supposed to be 0.31, not 0.32. Because 32 is the actual maximum number of spline points. It goes from, basically what this does is it counts a range kind of like an array. And as programmers know, arrays start at 0, not 1. So what I do here is I take this total, this float value divided by the total number of the maximum range for it. And then what that does is that gives me as a net value between 0 and 1. And what that will allow me to do is it will allow me to plug that into my equation, my method here, in which I get the location by plugging in the distance along the spline from 0 to 1, 0 representing the beginning, 1 representing the end. And what this method automatically does is it will automatically calculate where in the world space along that spline my character should be. So this is what sets up the initial point to kind of rotate our character and then begin going. The reason you see it so quick in the demonstration is because immediately after this line plays, in which I start my timer handler and we begin grinding. So that wraps up most of the changes from that method. A lot of my changes were specifically more towards my begin grinding method, as a lot of it was focused on setup for grinding versus the actual implementation of grinding along the rail. That's not to say there weren't some changes in the actual grind method itself. So one change right here that I kind of did, and this was kind of just for making it cleaner in general, that I found was that generally speaking, whenever I got to my endpoint, that I would kind of like jump off of my spline, which I'm kind of so generally speaking, once we get to our spline here, you'll see that the character itself will actually begin to will jump off at its endpoints. So that would be something to kind of look out for here. And what I would find is that when it jumped off the endpoints, the rotation would be not necessarily in the direction that the endpoint, this end rail itself is facing. Sometimes my character, my camera would be rotated this direction or maybe even slightly up and down. The reason part of that fix also comes from using the disabling the pawn control rotation up here in the other bit. But what I found was that it did not actually zero it out. So that's why I needed to once I finished getting to the maximum point along my spline, what I needed to do was I needed to kind of reset that rotation. Hence what I'm doing here, in which I'm finding the rotation for the end of the spline, and then setting it to that. That way my character will always face forward when I go off the spline. So that was the only real change that I put in here, aside from just this one extra line here that re-enables my pawn control rotation. That way I'm able to, move my camera around on my player as I'm walking around. Well, I think that about wraps that up for this video. Thanks for watching, and look forward to the next prototype.